Welcome back to Oliver's Stories. Tonight, we are stepping into a world of gaslights, velvet drapes, and hidden dangers. A time when homes looked beautiful, but could slowly poison you without anyone ever knowing. You think your place has problems? Wait until you hear what was lurking inside those gorgeous Victorian houses. You have just woken up in a Victorian bedroom. Your eyes open, but nothing changes. There is no gentle glow from a phone charger, no soft light filtering through the curtains from the street outside. Just darkness. The kind of darkness that feels thick enough to touch, heavy enough to press against your chest. The bed beneath you is not the cloud of memory foam you are used to. It is a lumpy sack of horsehair stuffed into coarse fabric. Metal springs poke at your back in places you did not know you had. You shift, trying to get comfortable, and the bed answers with a dry rustle. That is not your soft cotton sheets. That is straw. The Victorians added straw to mattresses, SSEs for extra cushioning. They thought it helped. It does not. And the air feels different, heavier, thicker, wrong. There is a smell you cannot quite place. Not exactly unpleasant, but unfamiliar. Wood smoke, coal dust, something musty and old, beeswax candles, linseed oil from furniture polish. Your breath makes little clouds in the frigid morning air. Even wealthy Victorian homes were freezing in the morning. No central heating here, just fireplaces, and none of them are lit yet. And that is when you hear it. Footsteps, light but purposeful, coming up what sounds like wooden stairs. The soft glow of a candle appears under the door. The door creaks open. A young woman in a plain black dress with a white apron stands there, candle in hand. The housemaid, come to light your fire before you get up. It is how all proper Victorian days begin, if you are fortunate enough to be middle or upper class. Good morning, ma'am, she says with a little curtsy. It is 6 o'clock. Shall I light your fire? Before you can answer, she is already moving to the fireplace. You watch, fascinated, as she kneels down and begins laying kindling and coal. Within minutes, a small fire is crackling in the grate. Cook says breakfast will be at 8, ma'am. Will you be wanting a bath this morning? A bath. Now, that sounds nice. Until you remember that Victorian bathing involved servants hauling buckets of hot water up flights of stairs, pouring them into a metal tub placed in front of the fire, and then standing around while you washed. Not exactly the private experience you are used to. No, thank you, you manage to say. Just some water for washing, please. The maid nods and leaves, returning moments later with a porcelain pitcher and basin. She pours the steaming water into the bowl, places it on the washstand, and then lays out a towel. Will there be anything else, ma'am? No, thank you. That is all. She curtsies again and withdraws, closing the door softly behind her. You throw back the heavy wool blankets and quilts and swing your legs over the side of the bed. The floor is bare wood, cold as ice beneath your feet. No wall-to-wall carpeting here, just scattered rugs that do little to ward off the chill. You make your way to the washstand and peer into the mirror above it. The glass is wavy, giving your reflection a slightly distorted look. You splash some water on your face and reach for what you assume is soap, a hard yellow bar that smells strongly of lye. The fire has taken the edge off the cold, but the room is still chilly. You look around for your clothes and spot them laid out on a chair. Petticoats, corset, dress. Way more layers than you are used to. Getting dressed is going to be a project, but first, you need to use the bathroom. You look around. No ensuite here, just a chamber pot tucked discreetly under the bed. Welcome to Victorian hygiene. You decide to hold it and get dressed first. Perhaps there is a proper toilet somewhere in this house. The Victorians did have flush toilets by the 1870s, though they were still something of a novelty. Dressing is a challenge. The corset alone is a puzzle, and you cannot possibly lace it properly on your own. You manage to get it on loosely, along with the petticoats, and then struggle into the dress. It is not properly fastened, but it will have to do for now. You open the bedroom door and step out into a hallway. The walls are covered in richly patterned wallpaper, deep green with gold accents. It is absolutely stunning, with an almost luminous quality to the green. Too bad, it is probably full of arsenic. Yes, that is right. That gorgeous green wallpaper. In Victorian times, they used arsenic to create that vibrant shade of green. Shields green, they called it, or Paris green. And it was everywhere. Wallpaper, curtains, clothing, even children's toys. The Victorians were absolutely obsessed with this particular shade, not realizing they were essentially surrounding themselves, elves, with poison. When it got damp or heated, the arsenic would release into the air. People breathing it in would get sick, headaches, nausea, even death in extreme cases. But the Victorians had no idea. They just thought the wallpaper was pretty. You make a mental note not to lick the walls, not that you were planning to. You make your way downstairs, one hand on the banister to steady yourself. The stairs are steep and narrow, another hidden danger of Victorian homes. Uneven steps were common, especially in the back stairs, used by servants. One misplaced foot, and you could take a nasty tumble. The main staircase, though, is grand and well constructed. The wealthy Victorians spared no expense on the parts of their homes that visitors would see. It is the hidden areas, servant stairs, back rooms, where corners were cut. You reach the bottom of the stairs and find yourself in an entrance hall. It is dimly lit, with heavy curtains blocking most of the morning light. Gas lamps flicker, are on the walls, casting an eerie glow. Another Victorian innovation that brought both convenience and danger. Gas lighting was a huge improvement over candles, but gas leaks were common and could lead to explosions or asphyxiation. A delicious smell wafts from what you assume is the direction of the kitchen. Bacon, fresh bread, coffee. Your stomach growls. Perhaps breakfast will help you make sense of this strange situation. You follow the smell down a hallway, past a formal dining room with a massive table that could seat 12, and into a cozy morning room. A smaller table is set for breakfast, with silver dishes keeping food warm over small flames. You almost laugh at the abundance laid out for just one person. Eggs, bacon, sausages, fish, toast, muffins, jam, and a silver pot of what smells like strong coffee. The Victorians did not believe in light breakfasts. They considered a hearty morning meal essential for health and energy. You sit down, and a maid immediately appears to serve you. You notice her hands are red and chapped. Working with lye soap, harsh cleaning chemicals, and hot water all day would do that. Household servants faced all kinds of occupational hazards. Chemical burns, back injuries from hauling water and coal, respiratory problems from dust and fumes. "Would you like tea or coffee, ma'am?" she asks. "Coffee, please," you reply. Watching as she pours a dark liquid into your cup, you take a sip and nearly choke. It is incredibly strong and bitter. Victorian coffee was often adulterated with chicory or even burnt sugar to stretch expensive coffee beans, and the milk, well, let us just say pasteurization was not standard practice yet. Speaking of milk, that is another hidden killer of the Victorian home. Milk was often purified with borax, an alkali that neutralized the taste of spoiled milk but did nothing to kill the bacteria that might be lurking in it. Thousands of children died from drinking contaminated milk in the Victorian era. You did, decide to skip the milk and drink your coffee black. The food, at least, looks good. You help yourself to some eggs and toast, avoiding the sausages. Victorian food safety standards were, well, non-existent, really. Food adulteration was common. Bread might contain alum or chalk, to make it whiter. Sausages might include all sorts of questionable fillers. Even tea was not safe. Sometimes it contained actual iron filings to make it look like higher quality black tea. As you eat, you gaze around the morning room. It is beautifully decorated with floral wallpaper, thankfully not green, comfortable furniture, and knickknacks everywhere. The Victorians loved their stuff. Every surface is covered with photographs, small sculptures, vases, books, and decorative boxes. Through the window, you can see a garden coming to life in the morning light. A gardener is already at work tending to flower beds. You wonder if he is using Paris green as an insecticide, another common use for the arsenic compound. Ound. The maid appears at your elbow. Will you be receiving visitors this afternoon, ma'am? There are already 2 calling cards that have been delivered. Calling cards, another Victorian custom. People would leave small cards with their names when they came to visit. If you were home and willing to receive them, they would be shown in. If not, they would just leave their card as evidence they had made the social effort. No, you say, not ready to face Victorian social customs when you barely understand the basics of surviving in this house. I think I will go for a walk this morning. Fresh air sounds good right about now, away from the arsenic wallpaper and the gaslights and all the other hidden dangers lurking in this beautiful home. Very good, ma'am. Shall I have your walking costume prepared? Your walking costume, because Victorians could not just throw on jeans and a t-shirt to go outside. They needed specific outfits for specific activities, and for women, these almost always included corsets, multiple layers, and long skirts that would drag in the street muck. Yes, please, you sigh. You might as well embrace the full Victorian experience. The maid nods and withdraws to prepare your outfit. You finish your breakfast and rise from the table, feeling slightly better with food in your stomach. You wander back into the hallway, looking for a bathroom before your walk. After checking several doors, you find what appears to be a water closet, a small room with an early flush toilet. It is a simple design. A wooden seat over a ceramic bowl with a pull chain to release water from a tank above. Not exactly modern plumbing, but better than the chamber pot. You use the facilities, marveling at this piece of Victorian technology. The flush toilet was a major advancement in sanitation, though early models had their issues. Methane from sewers could build up in pipes and occasionally ignite or even explode when exposed to a flame. Thomas Crapper, yes, that was his reason. El Name would later improve the design with a siphon valve to prevent sewer gases from coming back into the house. After washing your hands in a small basin, you return to your bedroom to find the maid waiting with your walking costume. It is a dark blue affair with a fitted jacket, a bustle at the back, and a skirt that brushes the floor. Shall I help you dress, ma'am? You nod, realizing there is no way you are getting into this contraption on your own. The maid helps you out of your loosely fastened morning dress and properly tightens your corset. You gasp as she pulls the laces. Not too tight, you manage to say. She looks surprised but loosens it a bit. Victorian beauty standards valued tiny waists, achieved through tight lacing that could compress internal organs and cause all sorts of health problems. Layer by layer, she helps you into the walking costume. Chemise, corset, petticoats, skirt, jacket. By the time you are fully dressed, you feel like you are wearing half your clothes. Luzette, from home. Your hat and gloves, ma'am, the maid says, presenting a small hat with feathers and a pair of kid leather gloves. No respectable Victorian lady would go outside with bare hands or an uncovered head. You put them on, feeling increasingly like you are in a costume drama. The maid hands you a parasol as well, not just a fashion accessory, but protection from the sun. Pale skin was desirable, a sign that you did not have to work outdoors like the lower classes. Fully equipped for your Victorian walk, you head downstairs and out the front door into the morning air. The street is already bustling with activity. Horses clip-clop past, pulling carriages. A street vendor calls out, selling flowers. Children in ragged clothes play in a side alley. You take a deep breath, relieved to be out of the house with its hidden dangers. But even here, there are hazards. The street is littered with horse manure. The air is thick with coal smoke from thousands of chimneys. And if it starts, RTs to rain, those beautiful green dyes in your clothing might begin to leach arsenic onto your skin. Still, it feels good to move. Even restricted by your corset and multiple layers, you set off down the street, parasol in hand, taking in the sights and sounds of Victorian England. You notice other ladies out for their morning constitutional, nodding politely as they pass. A gentleman tips his hat to you, and you incline your head in response, playing along with the social customs. As you walk, your mind drifts back to all the hidden dangers you have already encountered in just a few hours in a Victorian home. The arsenic wallpaper, the gaslighting, the potentially contaminated food and milk, the steep, uneven stairs. It is a wonder anyone survived. And yet, millions did. The Victorians were resilient, adapting to their world just as we adapt to ours. They did not know about the dangers lurking in their beautiful homes, just as we might be unaware of hazards in our own modern environment. Ornaments that future generations will find shocking. You realize how lucky you are to live in an age of building codes, food safety regulations, and consumer protection laws. All those boring bureaucratic rules that we take for granted actually keep us safe from the kinds of dangers that Victorians faced every day. Your muscles are starting to feel a bit tight from the corset, and you decide to head back to the house. You have had enough Victorian adventure for one morning. You turn around, watching your step carefully on the uneven cobblestones. Your heavy skirts swish around your ankles as you walk, and you find yourself settling into a rhythm, becoming more comfortable in this strange attire. The grand house comes back into view, its facade impressive, with tall windows and ornate detailing. Despite knowing about the hidden killers within, you cannot help but admire its beauty. The Victorians certainly knew how to build things to last. As you approach the front steps, you notice something you missed earlier. The boot scraper by the door, an essential tool in an era of muddy, manure-filled streets. You carefully clean your boots before entering. One small concession to Victorian propriety. The house feels warmer now that the day has progressed. Fires burn in several rooms, taking the chill from the air. You make your way to what appears to be a drawing room and sink into a plush armchair, grateful to be off your feet. A soft sigh escapes as you settle deeper into the chair. Your muscles gradually relax, the stiffness from the corset becoming less noticeable as you find a comfortable position. The room is quiet except for the gentle ticking of a clock on the mantelpiece and the occasional crackle from the fireplace. Your breathing naturally slows, finding a peaceful rhythm while you gaze around the elegantly appointed room with its heavy drapes and ornate furniture. The warmth of the drawing room makes your eyelids heavy, but a soft knock at the door interrupts. PTs, your moment of peace. The maid enters with a silver tray. "Your mail, ma'am," she says, placing several envelopes and a newspaper on the small table beside you. "And cook would like to know your preferences for dinner this evening." You blink, trying to imagine what a proper Victorian dinner might include. "Whatever cook recommends will be fine," you reply, taking the safe option. The maid nods and withdraws, leaving you with your correspondence. You pick up the newspaper first, The Times, dated May 1878. "So that is when you are..." The headlines talk about tensions with Russia, debates in Parliament, and various society events. Nothing about time travelers appearing in Victorian homes. The envelopes contain invitations to teas, dinner parties, and a charity bazaar. Apparently, your Victorian self is quite the social butterfly. You set them aside, more interested in exploring this house and its hidden dangers. You rise from the chair, feeling the constraint of your corset as you do. Th. Victorians really did themselves no favors with these torture devices. Restricted breathing, compressed internal organs, deformed ribs, all in the name of a fashionably tiny waist. And that is not even mentioning the damage done by the weight of all these skirts hanging from your compressed waist. No wonder Victorian women were always fainting. And, speaking of fashion dangers, many Victorian clothing items were dyed with toxic substances. That vibrant green dress in the wardrobe probably contains arsenic. The beautiful red flowers on that hat likely colored with mercury. Even the makeup on the dressing table, lead, belladonna, arsenic again. Beauty was quite literally poisonous in the Victorian era. You wander from the drawing room into what appears to be a library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves line the walls, filled with leather-bound volumes. A writing desk sits in one corner, complete with inkwell, blotter, and a stack of writing paper. The room smells of leather, paper, and swacks. It is peaceful here. Removed from the bustle of the household, you trail your fingers along the spines of the books, reading titles on history, natural philosophy, poetry, and novels. A large globe stands in one corner, showing the vast British Empire in pink. Next to it, a glass case contains various curiosities, shells, fossils, a stuffed exotic bird with brilliant plumage. Taxidermy was hugely popular in Victorian homes. They loved bringing nature inside, whether it was pressed flowers, stuffed animals, or cases of pinned butterflies. But the methods used to preserve these specimens often involved arsenic soap or mercuric chloride. Even their decorative items could be deadly. You move to the writing desk and sit down, curious about what your Victorian self might have been working on. A half-finished letter lies on the blotter, written in a flowing hand that is not yours. It mentions garden plans and an upcoming visit from someone named Charlotte. The ink is still in liquid form, or in a small glass well, iron gall ink, probably the standard writing ink of the time. It contains tannic acid, which can be corrosive enough to eventually eat through paper. Not immediately dangerous to you, but worth noting as another everyday item with hazardous properties. A soft chiming from a clock on the mantelpiece tells you it is now noon. The house seems to have come fully alive while you were reading. You can hear movement downstairs, the staff preparing lunch, perhaps. You rise and continue your exploration, moving into the hallway and toward the back of the house. The kitchen would be interesting to see, but you are not sure if it would be proper for the lady of the house to intrude on the cook's domain. Victorian homes operated on strict hierarchies, with everyone knowing their place. Instead, you find yourself in a small room that appears to be a kind of office or business room. A desk contains household account books, receipts, and various documents. This is where the practical business of running a Victorian household would take place. You flip through one of the account books, fascinated by the meticulous records. Every penny spent is accounted for. Wages for servants, food purchases, coal deliveries, dress fabrics, charitable donations. Running a Victorian household was essentially like managing a small business. The coal deliveries catch your eye. Victorian homes went through enormous amounts of coal to heat all those fireplaces. The resulting coal dust and smoke were major health hazards, contributing to respiratory diseases and the infamous London fog. Actually, smog, created by coal smoke combining with natural fog. You close the book and notice a cabinet in the corner. Opening it reveals bottles of medicine and household remedies. You pick one up cautiously. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, the label reads, for children teething. You nearly drop the bottle when you remember what this actually contains. Morphine. Victorian medicines were often laced with opiates, cocaine, or alcohol. This soothing syrup was essentially liquid morphine given to babies to stop them crying. It certainly stopped the crying, by drugging infants into unconsciousness. Some never woke up. You carefully replace the bottle and check a few others. Laudanum, a tincture of opium. Arsenic pills advertised as a complexion improver. Something called female pills that promises to cure obstructions and irregularities peculiar to the female form. The Victorian medicine cabinet was a veritable poison cabinet by modern standards, and these were legitimate commercially sold products, not some back-alley concoctions. It is a wonder anyone survived their treatments. A soft knock at the door interrupts your snooping. It is the maid again. "Luncheon is served in the morning room, ma'am," she says. You thank her and make your way back to the cozy room where you had breakfast. A light meal has been laid out. Cold meats, bread, cheese, and fruit. Simple, by Victorian standards, which is fine by you. You eat cautiously, still wary of food safety. The bread seems fresh at least, and the fruit has been carefully washed and peeled. You decide to risk the cheese, but avoid the meat. Better safe than sorry. After lunch, you are not sure what to do with yourself. What did Victorian ladies do with their afternoons? You remember reading that social calls were often made between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. Perhaps you are expected somewhere. But no, the maid would have reminded you if you had engagements. You decide to explore upstairs, curious about the rest of the house. The staircase creaks slightly under your weight as you ascend. Victorian construction was generally solid, but not perfect. At least this main staircase is well built, unlike the narrow, steep servant stairs that caused countless accidents. The upper floor contains several more bedrooms, a nursery, empty. Does your Victorian self have no children, and what appears to be a NG room? You peek into each, noting the decor and potential hazards. The nursery is particularly interesting. It is cheerful, with alphabet blocks and wooden toys scattered about. But you notice a painted rocking horse in the corner. It is bright red and green, paint likely containing lead. Lead paint was standard for children's toys, furniture, and room decorations. Children would chew on their toys or crib rails, ingesting the sweet-tasting lead and suffering neurological damage as a result. Next to the rocking horse sits a beautiful doll with a porcelain head and fabric body. Its rosy cheeks are probably painted with lead or mercury-based pigments. Even the fabric might be dyed with toxic chemicals. You leave the nursery feeling a new appreciation for modern toy safety regulations. The sewing room contains a table with a hand-cranked Singer sewing machine, a relatively new innovation for home use in this period. Beside it are baskets of fabric, spools of thread, and various sewing notions. You run your hand over a piece of emerald green fabric, then jerk it away, remembering the arsenic dyes. Better not to touch anything too colorful. A dressmaker's dummy stands in the corner, its waist impossibly small. You measure it with your hands and guess it is about 18 inches around. Your Victorian self must be dedicated to tight lacing. The window in this room provides a good view of the back garden. It is a formal affair with geometric beds, gravel paths, and a small fountain. A gardener is at work spraying something on the rose bushes, probably a pesticide. And in this era, that likely means more arsenic. Paris green was commonly used as an insecticide, contaminating soil and potentially the groundwater. You turn away from the window, feeling slightly overwhelmed by all these hidden dangers. Every room, every object seems to harbor some potential harm. How did the Victorians survive? But they did survive, you remind yourself. They were resilient, adaptable, and largely unaware of the risks they lived with, just as we probably live with hazards that future generations will find shocking. You make your way back downstairs, careful on the steps. Your heavy skirts make navigation tricky, and you have to hold the banister and lift your hem slightly to see your feet. One misstep on these stairs could mean a broken neck. No wonder so many Victorian novels include dramatic falls. Back in the drawing room, you notice it has grown darker outside. The short winter day is already fading to dusk. A maid enters silently and begins lighting the gas lamps, turning small keys to release the gas, then using a long match to light each one. You watch nervously, aware of how easily gas could leak from these fixtures. Carbon monoxide poisoning was a silent killer in Victorian homes, causing headaches, confusion, and eventually death. People would go to bed feeling slightly unwell and never wake up, killed by odorless gas seeping from faulty fixtures while through. I slept. The room grows brighter as each lamp is lit, casting a warm glow that makes the rich colors of the furnishings more vibrant. It is beautiful, you have to admit, despite the dangers. Will you be changing for dinner, ma'am? The maid asks. You had forgotten about that Victorian custom, changing into formal clothes for the evening meal, even if dining alone at home. The prospect of getting out of this walking costume and into something else, only to change again for bed later, seems exhausting. Yes, I suppose so, you sigh. You follow the maid upstairs to your bedroom, where she helps you out of your walking costume and into an evening dress. Midnight blue silk with black lace trim. It is gorgeous, but just as restrictive as your day clothes. The dress has a modest bustle at the back, supporting the elaborate draping of the skirt. Bustles were a strange Victorian fashion invention, essentially a framework worn under the skirt to create a pronounced posterior silhouette. They, made sitting awkward at best, and at worst, could collapse embarrassingly or even catch fire if a lady backed too close to a fireplace. Properly attired for dinner, you make your way back downstairs. The dining room is now set for one, with crystal, silver, and fine china laid out with mathematical precision. Multiple forks, spoons, and knives flank each side of the plate. Victorian dining etiquette was complex, with specific utensils for every conceivable food item. A footman stands ready to serve you, his expression carefully neutral. You sit down, and he places a napkin in your lap before serving the first course, a clear soup in a delicate china bowl. You eat carefully, conscious of being watched and judged on your table manners. Each course is small but exquisitely prepared. Soup, fish, meat, game, vegetables, pudding, cheese, fruit. It is excessive for one person, and you can only manage a few bites of each offering. The footman serves you a small glass of sweet wine with dessert. Tea, you sip it cautiously, aware that Victorian wine might contain all sorts of additives, lead to sweeten it or other stranger ingredients to improve color or clarity. By the time the meal concludes, you are exhausted from maintaining proper posture and navigating the complex meal service. Victorian formality is wearing, even when dining alone. Will you take coffee in the drawing room, ma'am? The footman asks. Yes, thank you, you reply, rising from the table. Back in the drawing room, you sink into an armchair near the fire. The day has grown cold as night falls, and the warmth is welcome. You notice a decanter of brandy on a side table and briefly consider a nightcap, but decide against it. Victorian spirits were often adulterated with all sorts of harmful substances to increase profits. A maid brings coffee on a silver tray, setting it on a table within your reach before withdrawing silently. The coffee is strong and bitter, but the warmth is comforting. You gaze into the fire, contemplating everything you have learned about the hidden dangers of Victorian life. It has been less than a day, and you have already identified dozens of potential hazards, from arsenic wallpaper to lead paint, from gaslighting to toxic medicines, from dangerous staircases to contaminated food. And yet, there is a certain charm to this world as well. The attention to detail in craftsmanship, the formality that lends significance to daily activities, the clear boundaries and expectations. It is alien to your modern sensibilities, but you can see why people of this era found comfort in their ordered existence. The clock chimes 8 o'clock. Still early by your standards, But in Victorian times, especially during winter, people often retired early to conserve expensive candles and lamp oil. You finish your coffee and stand, stretching discreetly within the confines of your corset. Your back aches from the unfamiliar posture constraints, and you long to be free of all these layers. The house has grown quiet. You can hear the servants moving about downstairs, finishing their evening duties. Soon they will bank the fires for the night and retire to their own quarters, typically located on the top floor or in the basement. You make your way upstairs to your bedroom, holding your skirts carefully to avoid tripping. The gas lamps in the hallway have been turned down to a soft glow, just enough to see by. Your bedroom feels welcoming now. The fire still burning cheerfully in the grate. The maid has turned down the bed, laying out a nightgown on the coverlet. You reach behind you, trying to unfasten your dress, but the buttons are impossible to reach. You will need help undressing, just as you needed help dressing. Victorian women of means were not expected to be able to dress themselves, another aspect of their dependency. You ring the bell pull beside the bed, and within moments the maid appears. She helps you out of your evening dress, unlaces your corset, blesses relief, and assists you into the nightgown, a long white cotton garment with lace trim and tiny pearl buttons up the front. "Will there be anything else, ma'am?" she asks. "No, thank you," you reply. "Good night." She curtsies and withdraws, taking your discarded clothing with her to be brushed and aired for tomorrow. Alone at last, you exhale deeply, feeling your ribs expand fully for the first time all day. The nightgown is surprisingly comfortable, the cotton soft against your skin after the stiff formality of your day clothes. You climb into the high bed, sinking into the slightly lumpy mattress. The sheets are clean but coarser than you are used to. The pillows are filled with feathers that poke through the fabric occasionally. The fire has burned low, casting gentle flickering light across the room. No electric light switch by the bed here. Once the fire dies, you will be in darkness until morning. You settle deeper into the bed, pulling the heavy quilts up around you. Despite all the hidden dangers you have discovered, you feel strangely at peace. Your body relaxes into the unfamiliar mattress, finding comfort in its firm support. The soft crackling of the dying fire creates a soothing rhythm that matches your slowing breath. Your muscles gradually release the tension from a day of navigating Victorian life, sinking heavier into the bedding as warmth envelops you. You yawn, stretching slightly under the weight of the quilts, feeling your eyes growing heavier as you watch the shadows dance across the ceiling. A loud bang from somewhere downstairs jolts you awake. Your heart races as you try to orient yourself. The fire has died down to embers, casting just enough light to remind you where you are. Still trapped in this Victorian house with all its hidden dangers. You strain your ears, listening for any other sounds. Was it just a settling house, an intruder, or something more sinister? A gas explosion, perhaps? After a few minutes of silence, you begin to. Oh, relax. Old houses make noises, nothing to worry about. You settle back against the pillows, but sleep seems far away now. Your mind wanders to all the other dangers you have not yet encountered in this Victorian home. What other hidden killers might be lurking in the beautiful surroundings? You think about the bathroom, or rather the lack of a proper one. Indoor plumbing was a luxury in Victorian times, and even wealthy homes often had rudimentary systems. The water closet you used earlier was a relatively advanced model for its time, but the sewage system it connected to was likely primitive by modern standards. Sewer gases, including methane, could build up in these early systems and sometimes leak back into the house. That is why Thomas Crapper's invention of the S-trap was so important. It created a water barrier that prevented gases from rising back through the pipes. But not all Victorian toilets had this feature yet. And what about the water itself? Victorian water supplies were often contaminated with bacteria from sewage. London's Great Stink of 1858 was a vivid demonstration of how bad things had gotten. The Thames had become an open sewer, and the stench was so unbearable that Parliament had to be suspended. Major cholera outbreaks were common until public health reforms improved water quality. Even in wealthy homes, water might be stored in lead-lined tanks, slowly poisoning the household. You shiver under the blankets, not just from the cooling room, but from the thought of all these invisible threats. The Victorians lived in a world of unseen dangers, bacteria they could not detect, gases they could not smell, poisons they did not recognize. Unable to fall back asleep, you sit up in bed and reach for the candlestick on the bedside table. Matches. Where would matches be? You fumble in the near darkness and find a small box. Carefully, you strike one against the side of the box. The match flares to life with a bright flare and a strong smell of sulfur. Fur. You quickly light the candle before the match burns your fingers. Early matches were dangerous things. Before the safety match was invented in 1855, people used lucifer matches that could ignite with the slightest friction. They contained white phosphorus, which caused a horrific occupational disease called phossy jaw in the factory workers who made them. The toxic phosphorus would enter the body through the gums, causing abscesses, bone decay, and eventual disfigurement as the jawbone literally rotted away. Workers' faces would glow in the dark from the phosphorus in their systems. Many died painful deaths, while others committed suicide rather than face the progressive deformity. The candle gives a steady, warm light, much safer than those early matches. You look around the room, seeing it differently in the soft glow. Shadows dance on the wallpaper, bringing the patterns to life. Your nightgown provides little warmth, and the fire is nearly out. You consider ringing for a sir. Want to rekindle it, but it seems cruel to wake someone just for your comfort. Instead, you spot a dressing gown laid across a chair and pull it on over your night clothes. The thick wool instantly provides warmth. You slide your feet into slippers and decide to explore the house by candlelight. It feels adventurous, almost rebellious, to wander a Victorian home at night. You open your bedroom door carefully, trying to avoid any creaks that might wake the household. The hallway is dark and silent. You lift your candle higher, watching the shadows retreat from its light. The grand staircase looks different at night, more imposing, almost threatening. You descend slowly, one hand holding the candle, the other clutching the banister. The steps seem steeper in the dim light, and you are acutely aware of how easily you could fall. Household accidents were a leading cause of death in Victorian times, and stairs were particularly dangerous. You reach the bottom safely and pause, considering. Gee, which way to go? The drawing room holds little interest now. You have already explored it thoroughly. Instead, you turn toward the back of the house, curious about the kitchen and service areas you have not yet seen. A long corridor leads past the dining room toward what must be the servants' domain. You follow it, your slippers silent on the wooden floor. The house feels larger at night, the shadows concealing its true dimensions. You reach a baize door, the traditional barrier between the family areas and the servants' quarters. It is covered in green fabric to muffle sounds from the kitchen and to create a clear boundary between the two worlds of the Victorian house. You push it open gently and step into a different realm. The air is cooler here, the decor much plainer. No expensive wallpaper or ornate moldings, just simple painted walls and functional furnishings. A large kitchen opens up before you. By daylight, it would be a busy, steamy place full of activity. Now it is quarter. I eat and still, but signs of the day's work remain. A large cast iron range dominates one wall, its fire banked for the night, but still radiating some heat. Copper pots hang from a rack, gleaming dully in your candlelight. A massive wooden table occupies the center of the room, its surface scarred from years of food preparation. You set your candle on the table and look around with interest. The kitchen was the heart of the Victorian home, but it was also one of the most dangerous rooms. Burns and scalds were common injuries for cooks and kitchen maids who worked with open flames and boiling liquids all day. The heavy cast iron pots could cause serious injuries if dropped. Even the range itself was hazardous. Its coal fire required constant attention, and the smoke and fumes contributed to respiratory problems. A movement in the corner catches your eye, and you freeze. A small dark shape scurries across the floor. A mouse, heading for cover. Victorian kitchens, with their stores of food, odd and warmth, were havens for rodents, despite the best efforts of servants and cats. Speaking of cats, you hear a soft meow and turn to see a tabby watching you from atop a large cupboard. The kitchen cat, kept not as a pet, but as a working animal to control the mouse population, regards you with amber eyes, seemingly unbothered by your intrusion into its domain. Next to the kitchen is a scullery, a separate room for the messy work of washing dishes and scouring pots. A large stone sink stands under a window with a hand pump for drawing water. No hot and cold taps here. Water would be heated on the range and carried to the sink in kettles and buckets. The work was backbreaking, especially for the scullery maid, typically the youngest, lowest-ranking servant, who spent hours each day scrubbing and cleaning in cold, damp conditions. Her hands would be red and chapped from lye soap and constant immersion in water. Chilblains were common in winter, a painful inflammation of the small blue D vessels caused by repeated exposure to cold, followed by warming. You leave the scullery and continue exploring. A door leads to a small pantry, its shelves lined with foodstuffs, flour, sugar, dried beans, and preserves in glass jars. You lift your candle to examine the labels, curious about Victorian food storage. One jar contains pickled vegetables, a common preservation method before refrigeration. The metal lid gives you pause. It is likely sealed with lead solder, which could leach into the food and cause chronic lead poisoning. The symptoms, fatigue, irritability, abdominal pain, would often go unrecognized or be attributed to other causes. Another shelf holds bottles of sauce and condiments, including the popular Worcestershire sauce. The original recipe contained anchovies fermented in brine, creating the distinctive savory flavor that Victorians loved. But without modern refrigeration and preservatives, these condiments could harbor dangerous bacteria, especially once opened. You back out of the pantry, suddenly less interested in Victorian cuisine. Your candle is burning low, and you should return upstairs before you are discovered wandering where the lady of the house has no business being. As you turn to leave, another door catches your eye, a baize door, probably leading to the cellar. Victorian cellars were multi-purpose spaces used for storing coal, wine, and preserved foods. They were often damp, poorly ventilated, and breeding grounds for mold and fungi. Some of these molds could be toxic, especially black mold that thrived in damp conditions. The Victorians would not have understood the connection between mold exposure and respiratory problems, headaches, or fatigue. They might attribute such symptoms to bad air or miasmas rather than identifying the specific cause. You decide against exploring the cellar. It would be dark, possibly locked, and venturing down steep stone steps by candlelight seems unnecessarily risky. Instead, you make your way back through the kitchen toward the baize door. As you pass the range, you notice a collection of flat irons on a shelf nearby. These solid metal implements would be heated on the range and then used to press clothing and linens. Before electric irons, this was how wrinkles were removed, with heavy, scorching hot pieces of metal that required skill and caution to use without burning oneself or the fabric. Laundry work was another hazardous occupation in Victorian times. The washerwomen or laundry maids would use caustic soaps, boiling water, and dangerous equipment like mangles, devices with heavy rollers, that pressed water from wet clothes but could crush fingers if used carelessly. The chemicals used in laundering were harsh: lye for making soap, oxalic acid for removing stains, and various bleaching agents. Prolonged exposure could cause skin damage, respiratory problems, and even chemical burns. You push through the baize door, returning to the more familiar territory of the main house. The contrast between the plain, functional servants' areas and the ornate family spaces is striking, a physical manifestation of the rigid class divisions of Victorian society. The clock in the hallway shows it is just past midnight, the witching hour. You smile at the thought. The Victorians were certainly superstitious enough to believe in such things. Spiritualism was wildly popular, with séances and spirit communications a fashionable pastime among the upper classes. Even Queen Victoria herself had consulted mediums after Prince Albert's death. You make your way back to the grand staircase and begin to climb, your candle casting strange elongated shadows on the walls. The house creaks and settles around you, the sounds more noticeable in the night's silence. Halfway up, you pause to catch your breath. The dressing gown is warm but heavy, and the Victorian diet and lifestyle were not exactly conducive to cardiovascular fitness. Tight corsets, restricted breathing, rich foods taxed the digestive system, and ladies were discouraged from anything resembling vigorous exercise. Victorian medicine had little understanding of how lifestyle affected health. Doctors might prescribe rest cures, tonics, or strange devices like electric belts that supposedly stimulated the internal organs with mild electrical currents. Needless to say, these treatments did little to address the underlying causes of poor health. You continue up the stairs, moving carefully in the flickering light. The grand staircase was designed to impress visitors, not to be navigated by candlelight. The ornate banister helps steady you as you climb. At the top, you turn toward your bedroom, ready to return to the questionable comfort of the Victorian bed. But a sound stops you, a soft whimpering from another room. Curious, you follow the noise down the hallway. It leads you to the nursery you explored earlier. The door is ajar, and you push it open slowly, lifting your candle to see inside. A small figure sits up in a child's bed, tears glistening on round cheeks. A little girl of perhaps 5 or 6 years with long dark hair in a simple nightgown. She looks up as you enter, eyes widening at the sight of you. "Mama," she says hesitantly. "So, your Victorian self has a child after all. You had not seen her during the day. Perhaps she was visiting relatives or at lessons with a governess." "I had a bad dream," she says, her voice small in the dark room. You move to her bedside, setting the candle on a table. "It is all right," you say softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "It was just a dream." She looks at you with complete trust, accepting your presence and comfort without question. You smooth her hair back from her forehead, noting how warm she feels, slightly too warm, perhaps. Fever was always a concern in Victorian times, when common childhood illnesses could quickly turn deadly. "Would you like me to stay until you fall asleep again?" you ask. She nods, lying back, CK against her pillows. You tuck the blankets around her, noting that, despite the apparent wealth of the household, the child's bed is fairly simple. An iron bedstead with a thin mattress. Victorian child-rearing philosophy emphasized simplicity and discipline, even for the wealthy. No soft, cozy beds or excessive toys that might spoil the child. You sit quietly, watching as her eyelids grow heavy. The candle flickers, casting gentle shadows across the room. The rocking horse stands sentinel in the corner, its painted eyes seeming to watch you in the dim light. The child's breathing deepens as she drifts back to sleep. You remain a few minutes longer, studying her face. She looks peaceful now, untroubled by bad dreams or thoughts of the many dangers surrounding her in this beautiful, treacherous Victorian home. How many hazards does this child face each day without knowing it? The lead paint on her toys, the potentially contaminated milk she drinks, the medicines laced with opiates that might be given to her for the slightest complaint, the diseases that Victorian medicine has no real treatment for. Diphtheria, scarlet fever, measles, whooping cough. Child mortality was heartbreakingly high in Victorian times. Even in wealthy families like this one, children died from diseases and accidents that would be preventable today. Parents lived with the constant fear of losing their little ones, which perhaps explains some of the emotional distance that seems strange to modern sensibilities. The child stirs slightly in her sleep, her small hand finding yours in the darkness. You hold it gently, feeling a surge of protectiveness toward this unknown child who believes you are her mother. Her hand is soft and warm in yours, her pulse beating steadily beneath paper-thin skin. You sit there for a long time, just holding her hand and listening to her breathe. The candle burns lower, its light growing dimmer. Your own eyelids feel heavy, your body settling into a comfortable stillness as you watch over the sleeping child. Your breathing naturally slows to match hers, deep and rhythmic in the quiet room. The tension in your shoulders melts away as you find a more comfortable position on the edge of the bed, still holding that tiny hand in yours. A gentle hand on your shoulder wakes you. You open your eyes, momentarily confused. You are still sitting on the edge of the child's bed, but your candle has burned out. A different light source illuminates the room. A lamp, held by a woman in a simple dark dress. "Ma'am," she whispers, "you fell asleep in the nursery." It takes you a moment to place her. The night nurse, responsible for the children during the night hours. In wealthy Victorian households, childcare was often delegated to a hierarchy of servants, nannies, nursery maids, and night nurses. "Miss Charlotte had a bad dream," you explain softly, carefully extracting your hand from the sleeping child's grasp. The nurse nods, setting her lamp down. She oft does, "Ma'am, I will stay with her now." You rise stiffly from the bed, your back aching from the awkward position. The nurse watches you with a carefully neutral expression, but you can sense her curiosity. It was unusual for a Victorian mother of your apparent social standing to personally comfort a child at night. That was what servants were for. You make your way back to your own bedroom, navigating the dark hallway by memory and the faint glow of moonlight through occasional windows. Your candle is long gone, and you have no matches to light another. The house is utterly silent now, the only sound your soft footsteps on the carpet runner. You reach your bedroom and slip inside, grateful to find the embers in the fireplace still providing a faint red glow to see by. The bed looks inviting after your uncomfortable doze in the nursery. You shed the heavy dressing gown and climb under the covers, sinking into the mattress with a sigh of relief. You lie there waiting for sleep to reclaim you. Your mind drifts back to the child. Charlotte. What kind of life would she have in this beautiful, dangerous, Victorian world? What expectations and limitations would shape her future? For a girl of her apparent social class, education would be limited and focused on accomplishments rather than intellectual development. Music, drawing, perhaps French or Italian, needlework, skills designed to make her an attractive marriage prospect, not to develop her mind or prepare her for independence. Her world would grow increasingly constrained as she matured. The relative freedom of childhood would give way to the rigid expectations of Victorian girlhood and womanhood. Her body would be disciplined with corsets and restrictive clothing. Her behavior would be policed according to strict social codes, and her health would face numerous threats beyond the everyday dangers of the Victorian home. Puberty would bring the additional hazard of childbearing, in an era before antibiotics or safe cesarean sections. Maternal mortality was high, even among the wealthy. Women died from hemorrhage, infection, and eclampsia, conditions that are treatable today but were often fatal in Victorian times. You turn onto your side, pulling the blankets higher against the chill. The fire has almost died now, leaving the room in near darkness. Your thoughts continue to circle, unable to settle. Even if Charlotte survived to adulthood and the potential dangers of childbirth, she would face other health risks unique to Victorian women. The fashionable tight lacing of corsets could cause internal organ damage and breathing difficulties. The heavy skirts dragging on polluted streets would bring filth into the home. The restrictive clothing would discourage exercise and contribute to poor overall health. And then there were the psychological constraints. Victorian women of the middle and upper classes were confined to a separate sphere, the domestic realm. LM. They were considered morally superior but intellectually inferior to men, too delicate for education or professional ambitions, yet somehow strong enough for the demands of running a household and bearing numerous children. The result was often what Victorian doctors called hysteria, a catch-all diagnosis for women's physical and mental health complaints that we now recognize as depression, anxiety, and legitimate physical ailments. The treatments were sometimes as harmful as the conditions themselves, from rest cures that involved complete isolation to surgical interventions like female castration, the removal of the ovaries. You shiver, not entirely from the cold. The past was indeed a foreign country, with different values, different knowledge, and different dangers. For all the aesthetic appeal of Victorian design and the romanticized vision of Victorian family life, the reality was far harsher than most modern people realize. Your thoughts are interrupted by a strange smell, something acrid and chemical. You sit up suddenly, alert. Fire was a constant danger in Victorian homes with their open flames, gaslighting, and lack of fire safety standards. You sniff again, trying to identify the odor. It is not quite smoke, but something equally concerning. Could it be gas? A leaking gas pipe would fill a room with odorless, deadly carbon monoxide. But the gas itself often had additives that gave it a distinctive smell. You climb out of bed, heart racing, and follow your nose. The smell seems to be coming from the hallway. You open your door cautiously and peer out. A faint light comes from the end of the corridor. Someone is awake in another room. You wrap your dressing gown around you again and move toward the light, still trying to identify the troubling smell. It leads you to a small room you had not noticed before, a private bathroom, more advanced than you would have expected for this period. Inside, a man stands at a sink, mixing something in a glass vessel. He is middle-aged with a beard and dressing gown, concentrating intently on his task. He looks up, startled at your appearance. "My dear, you should be asleep," he says. "Your Victorian husband, you presume." He seems unalarmed by the chemical smell that brought you here. "What are you doing?" you ask, eyeing the array of bottles and powders on the countertop. "Just mixing my sleep-in draft," he explains. "The doctor says it is perfectly safe, but the smell is rather unpleasant, I know." You step closer, examining the ingredients with growing concern. You recognize laudanum, a tincture of opium, and what appears to be chloral hydrate, an early sedative. Both were commonly prescribed by Victorian doctors for insomnia, anxiety, and a host of other complaints, real or imagined. Both were also potentially addictive and dangerous, especially in combination. Chloral hydrate was nicknamed knockout drops and was one of the first date rape drugs. Mixed with alcohol, it formed a concoction, known as a Mickey fin, that could render someone unconscious. "Does it help you sleep?" you ask cautiously. He nods, stirring the mixture with a glass rod. "Most effectively, though it does leave one rather groggy in the morning." "The price we pay for modern medicine, I suppose." Modern medicine indeed. You watch as he measures out a dose with a small glass dropper, adds it to a tumbler of water, and drinks it down with a grimace. "Vile stuff," he comments, "but better than lying awake until dawn." You should return to bed, my dear. No sense in both of us suffering from insomnia. You nod, backing out of the bathroom. He follows, turning down the gas lamp and closing the door behind him. The smell lingers in the hallway, but it is already dissipating. Good night, he says formally, giving you a slight bow before heading toward what you assume is his bedroom. Separate bedrooms were common among the Victorian upper classes, another difference from modern domestic arrangements. You return to your own room, troubled by what you have witnessed. How many Victorians were slowly poisoning themselves with doctor-prescribed chemicals? Laudanum addiction was widespread but rarely acknowledged. Women were particularly vulnerable, often being prescribed opiates for female complaints and then becoming dependent on the drugs. Back in bed, you pull the covers up to your chin, feeling the chill more acutely now. The fire has died completely, leaving the room in darkness. You can hear the wind outside, rattling a loose window frame somewhere. Winter nights were long and cold in Victorian England. Even wealthy homes struggled to maintain comfortable temperatures with only fireplaces for heat. The poor suffered far worse, sometimes burning furniture or even parts of their houses when coal ran out. You think of the servants sleeping in attic rooms far above or basement chambers below. Their quarters would be Spartan at best. Narrow beds, minimal furnishings, perhaps a small fireplace shared. Ed among several rooms. They would rise before the family, prepare the house for the day, and work until late evening, all for wages that barely covered their basic needs. The inequality of Victorian society was stark and accepted as natural. The rigid class hierarchy shaped every aspect of life, from housing to education to healthcare. The wealthy might pity the poor, might engage in charity, but few questioned the fundamental structures that created such disparities. You burrow deeper under the blankets, seeking warmth and comfort. Despite all its dangers and injustices, there is something compelling about this Victorian world. The craftsmanship in everyday objects, the attention to beauty in ordinary things, the clear social codes that, while restrictive, provided structure and meaning. But you would not want to live here permanently. Not with the arsenic in the wallpaper, the lead in the paint, the opium in the medicine cabinet, and all the other hidden killers lurking in plain sight. Your thoughts drift to your own modern home with its smoke detectors and carbon monoxide alarms, its child-proof cabinets and lead-free paint. The safety features you take for granted are the result of hard lessons learned, often at a tragic cost. The wind rises outside, sending another rattling sound through the house. Old houses are always noisy at night, settling and creaking as temperature changes cause materials to expand and contract. You listen to the sounds of the Victorian night, the wind, the house, the occasional distant noise from the street. No cars, no airplanes, no electronic hums or beeps, just the natural sounds of weather and wood and the occasional clip-clop of a late-night hansom cab passing by. There is a certain peace in that simplicity. For all its dangers, the Victorian world moved at a slower pace, without the constant connectivity and information overload of modern life. You feel yourself growing drowsy again, your mind slowing as sleep approaches. The unfamiliar sounds and smells of the Victorian house have become almost comforting in their strangeness. Tomorrow will bring more discoveries, more hidden dangers to identify, but for now, sleep beckons, drawing you down into its depths. The heavy quilts create a cocoon of warmth around you, and despite the unfamiliar surroundings, your body relaxes into the mattress. Your last conscious thought is of Charlotte, sleeping peacefully in her nursery under the watchful eye of the night nurse. What will her future hold in this beautiful, dangerous Victorian world? Then sleep claims you, carrying you away from these questions into dreams of gas lamps and horse-drawn carriages, of corsets and calling cards, of a world both familiar and utterly foreign. The night deepens around the sleeping house. Gas lamps burn low in the streets outside, casting pools of yellowish light on the cobblestones. A police constable makes his rounds, checking door locks and keeping watch for troublemakers or signs of fire. The twin fears of Victorian urban dwellers. Inside, the household sleeps, the family in their separate bedrooms, the servants in their attic quarters. The kitchen cat prowls for mice, its eyes gleaming in the darkness. The fires have all died down to embers or gone out entirely, allowing the winter chill to creep back into the rooms. By morning, the servants will be up before dawn, rekindling fires, heating water, preparing for another day in this elegant, dangerous Victorian home. The rhythms of the household will resume. Breakfast, morning calls, luncheon, afternoon visits, dinner. The routines that structure Victorian life will unfold again, predictable and proper. But for now, all is still and silent. The hidden killers sleep too, waiting patiently in the wallpaper, the medicine cabinet, the gas fixtures, and 100 other places throughout the house. Dangers the Victorians never suspected, living alongside them day after day. You sleep deeply, untroubled by the ease thoughts. Your breathing is slow and regular, your body heavy with exhaustion from navigating this unfamiliar world. Your muscles gradually relax into the mattress, releasing the tension of a day spent in strange surroundings. The weight of the quilts provides a comforting pressure that makes you sink deeper into the bed. A gentle sigh escapes your lips as you shift slightly, finding that perfect position where your body can fully surrender to rest. Morning arrives with a gentle knock at your door. You open your eyes to find the room already bright. The maid has come in and drawn back the heavy curtains, letting in the winter sunlight. She has also rekindled the fire, which now crackles cheerfully in the grate. "Good morning, ma'am," she says with a curtsy. "It is 7 o'clock. Shall I bring your morning tea?" You nod, still groggy from the deep sleep of the Victorian night. "Yes, thank you." She withdraws, and you push yourself up against the pillows, taking in the room with fresh eyes. In daylight, the Victorian bedroom reveals new details. The fine craftsmanship of the furniture, the subtle patterns in the wallpaper, the small decorative objects arranged on surfaces. Beauty was important to the Victorians, who filled their homes with ornate, handcrafted items. The maid returns promptly with a silver tray bearing a teapot, cup and saucer, and a small plate of thin toast. She sets it on a table near the bed and pours you a cup of steaming tea. "Will you be wanting a bath this morning, ma'am?" she asks. You consider this. A Victorian bath would involve servants hauling multiple buckets of hot water up from the kitchen, filling a portable tub in front of the fire. It would be a production, requiring significant effort from the household staff. "No, thank you," you reply. "Just washing water will be fine." She nods and leaves to fetch it, returning shortly with the same porcelain pitcher and basin from yesterday. The routine of Victorian morning ablutions begins again. In. Washing with a cloth at the basin rather than showering, cleaning your teeth with a boar bristle brush and tooth powder rather than modern toothpaste. You sip the strong tea between these activities, finding comfort in its warmth and familiar taste. Tea, at least, has not changed much since Victorian times, though the lead that might have been in the solder of the teapot is something you prefer not to think about. The toast is dry and plain. Victorians did not typically butter their breakfast toast, considering it too heavy for the morning meal. It is a small cultural difference that highlights how even our eating habits have evolved over time. As you finish your simple breakfast, your mind turns to the coming day. What new dangers will you discover in this beautiful, treacherous Victorian home? What other hidden killers might be lurking behind the elegant facade? The maid returns to help you dress. Today, you choose a simpler morning dress from the wardrobe, still requiring a corset, unfortunately, but with fewer layers and trimmings than yesterday's walking costume. You are starting to understand why Victorian women changed clothes multiple times a day. Each outfit was designed for specific activities and times, and none were particularly comfortable for extended wear. Properly attired for the morning, you make your way downstairs. The house is more active today. You can hear voices from various rooms, footsteps on the stairs, the clatter of dishes from the direction of the kitchen. In the morning room, you find Charlotte having her breakfast under the supervision of a stern-looking woman in a black dress, the nanny, presumably. The child's face lights up when she sees you. "Good morning, Mama," she says politely. "Good morning, Charlotte," you reply, sitting down at the table. The nanny gives you a respectful nod. "Miss Charlotte has finished her lessons for this morning, ma'am. Shall I take her for her walk in the park now, or would you prefer she remain at home?" Before you can answer, a maid enters with a small silver tray bearing a calling card. "Mrs. Henderson has called, ma'am," she announces. "She says it is regarding the charity bazaar next week." The constant interruptions and formalities of Victorian life are beginning to make sense to you now. Each interaction follows prescribed rules. Each activity has its proper time and place. The rigid structure might seem stifling to modern sensibilities, but it provided a framework that made the complexities of Victorian social life navigable. "Please tell Mrs. Henderson I will be with her shortly," you tell the maid. Then to the nanny, "Yes, take Charlotte for her walk. The fresh air will do her good." Fresh air was one thing the Victorians got right. Despite not understanding germ theory until late in the period, they intuitively valued ventilation and outdoor activity, particularly for children. Regular walks, regardless of weather, were considered essential for health. The nanny helps see. Harlot put on her coat, hat and gloves. The child looks like a miniature adult in her formal outdoor attire, constrained by layers of clothing and strict behavioral expectations. "Be good for Nanny," you tell her, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek, a moment of maternal affection that seems to surprise both the child and the nanny. Perhaps your Victorian self is not usually so demonstrative. After they leave, you prepare to meet Mrs. Henderson. Social calls were a crucial part of Victorian middle and upper-class life, especially for women. They allowed for the exchange of information, the maintenance of social connections, and the organization of charitable activities, one of the few areas where women could exercise public influence. You enter the drawing room to find a plump, middle-aged woman in an elaborate visiting dress, waiting for you. She rises as you enter, extending her hand. "My dear Mrs. Wallace," she exclaims, "how well you look today. I've come about the flower arrangement." Enters for the bazaar. "I know we agreed on chrysanthemums, but Mrs. Petton is using those for her stall, and it simply won't do to have duplications." You nod, as if this makes perfect sense, though the details of the charity bazaar are a mystery to you. "What do you suggest instead?" you ask, taking a seat across from her. Mrs. Henderson launches into a detailed discussion of seasonal flower availability, cost considerations, and the symbolic meanings of various blooms. The Victorians attached significant symbolism to flowers, using them to communicate messages that couldn't be spoken directly in their constrained social environment. As she talks, you notice a slight headache beginning behind your eyes. The air in the drawing room feels stuffy despite the high ceilings. You glance at the wallpaper, a floral pattern in shades of blue and cream, not green, thankfully, so probably not containing arsenic. But who knows what other chemicals might be present in the dyes. And the gas lamps, though not OT lit during daylight, could be leaking small amounts of gas into the room. Carbon monoxide poisoning often began with headaches and fatigue before progressing to more serious symptoms. You rise and move to a window, opening it slightly under the pretext of checking the weather. Perhaps roses would be suitable, you suggest, breathing in the fresher air from outside. They're always popular. Mrs. Henderson nods enthusiastically. White roses would be lovely. They symbolize purity and innocence, most appropriate for a charitable cause. And we could add some ivy for fidelity and friendship. The Victorians' love of symbolic meanings extended beyond flowers to all aspects of their decorative arts. Colors, patterns, motifs, all carried messages that were understood by those fluent in the visual language of the time. Even mourning jewelry containing locks of hair from the deceased communicated specific sentiments, depending on how the hair was arranged. Your conversation with Mrs. Henderson continues. News for the better part of an hour, covering not just the charity bazaar, but local gossip, mutual acquaintances, and various social events. Throughout, you maintain the polite, somewhat reserved demeanor expected of a Victorian lady, while gathering valuable information about your supposed life here. When she finally takes her leave, you feel mentally exhausted from the effort of navigating unfamiliar social waters. The formal visiting rituals, the coded language, the careful maintenance of propriety, all require constant attention and self-monitoring. You return to the window, opening it wider to dispel the lingering stuffiness. Outside, the winter day is bright but cold. People pass by on the street, ladies in fashionable walking costumes, gentlemen in top hats, servants on errands, children with hoops and sticks. Horse-drawn carriages and carts create a steady background noise of wheels and hoofbeaters on cobblestones. The Victorian city was a sensory assault, noisy, smelly, visual, chaotic. Without modern zoning laws, residential areas often intermingled with commercial and even industrial zones. A fine house like this one might stand next to a shop or workshop, sharing walls with businesses that produced noise, odor, and pollutants. And the streets themselves were hazardous. Horse manure created a persistent public health problem, breeding flies and contaminating food and water. Crossing roads meant navigating through traffic with no signals or crosswalks. Even the air was dangerous, filled with coal, smoke, and industrial emissions that created the infamous London fog, a toxic miasma that could cause respiratory problems and even death during particularly bad episodes. You close the window, having had enough fresh air for the moment, and decide to explore more of the house. There must be areas you haven't seen yet, perhaps a library or study where you might learn more about your Victorian life. You find what you're looking for down a short corridor. A own room lined with bookshelves and dominated by a large desk. This must be your husband's study. The masculine equivalent of your feminine drawing room. Victorian homes often had this gender division of space, with certain rooms considered primarily male or female domains. The study feels different from the rest of the house, darker, heavier, more austere. The furniture is solid oak rather than the lighter, more decorative pieces in the family areas. The walls are paneled in wood rather than covered in wallpaper. Even the color scheme is different. Deep greens and browns rather than the pastels and florals of the women's spaces. You browse the bookshelves, noting titles on law, history, natural philosophy, and classical literature. Your Victorian husband appears to be well educated and intellectual. No fiction or poetry here. Those lighter forms of literature would be considered more appropriate for the female members of the household. On the desk, papers are neatly arranged beside an eye, enquel, and blotter. You scan them discreetly, learning that Mr. Wallace, your husband, is a barrister with chambers in the Inns of Court. Legal documents, letters from colleagues, and notes for cases provide glimpses into his professional life. A photograph in a silver frame catches your eye. A formal portrait of a family group. You recognize yourself in Victorian dress. Seated beside the bearded man you encountered last night. Behind you stand two young men in their late teens or early 20s, and Charlotte sits on a small chair at your feet. Your Victorian family captured in the stiff, solemn style of early photography. Photography was still relatively new in the Victorian era, and sitting for a portrait was a serious undertaking. The long exposure times required subjects to remain perfectly still, explaining the somber expressions commonly seen in Victorian photographs. It wasn't that they never smiled, simply too difficult to hold a smile for the required time. You replace the photograph carefully and continue exploring the study. A globe stands in one corner. The British Empire marked in pink across vast swaths of the world map. A display case contains geological specimens, crystals, fossils, unusual rocks. The Victorians had a passion for collecting and categorizing the natural world, part of their broader interest in scientific classification and understanding. But even here, in this seemingly safe, scholarly environment, dangers lurk. The taxidermy birds on the mantelpiece were likely preserved with arsenic. The beautiful mineral specimens might include toxic substances like cinnabar, mercury sulfide, or real gar, arsenic sulfide. Even the books could be hazardous. Some Victorian book bindings used arsenic to create vibrant green covers, and the paper itself might contain toxic substances. You begin to feel that nowhere in this Victorian home is truly safe. Every beautiful object, every convenience, every luxury potentially harbors some hidden killer. It's a ring realization about the cost of progress. Innovations often arrive before their dangers are fully understood. A soft knock at the door interrupts your thoughts. It's the maid again. "Luncheon is served, Mom," she announces, and Miss Charlotte has returned from her walk. You thank her and head to the morning room, where a light meal has been laid out. Charlotte is already seated, her outdoor clothes removed, looking pink-cheeked and refreshed from her time in the park. "Did you enjoy your walk?" you ask, taking a seat beside her. "Yes, Mama," she replies politely. "We saw the band in the park, and Nanny bought me a hot chestnut." Street vendors selling hot chestnuts were a common sight in Victorian winters, providing welcome warmth for both hands and stomach on cold days. It was one of the small pleasures available even to the less affluent classes, a momentary respite from the harsh realities of Victorian urban life. Lunch is a simple affair by Victorian standards: cold meats, bread, cheese, and fruit. Charlotte eats daintily, clearly well-trained in proper table manners. Victorian children of the middle and upper classes were expected to behave like miniature adults, particularly at mealtimes. As you eat, you study Charlotte more carefully. She appears healthy and well cared for, if somewhat subdued by modern standards. Victorian child rearing emphasized obedience, restraint, and proper behavior rather than emotional expression or individuality. "What lessons did you have this morning?" you ask. Genuinely curious about Victorian education for girls. "Scripture and French, Mama," she replies. "And I practiced my scales on the piano forte." A typical education for a girl of her class focused on moral instruction, basic academic subjects, and the accomplishments that would make her an attractive marriage prospect in the future. The goal was not to develop her intellect or prepare her for independence, but to mold her into a proper Victorian lady who would make a suitable wife and mother. After lunch, you spend a quiet hour with Charlotte in the drawing room. She shows you her needlework, a sampler she's stitching with the alphabet, and a moral verse. Her small fingers work the needle competently, though you notice she squints slightly at the fine stitches. Victorian children often developed vision problems from detailed handwork in poor lighting. Eyeglasses existed, but were not always provided promptly, and the stigma attached to wearing them sometimes prevented their use, particularly for girls whose appearance was considered so important to their future prospects. When the nanny returns to take Charlotte for her afternoon lessons, you feel a surprising reluctance to see her go. Despite knowing this is not really your child, you've developed a protective feeling toward her, an awareness of the many threats she faces in this beautiful, dangerous Victorian world. The afternoon stretches before you, empty of obligations until tea time. You decide to write a letter. a quintessentially Victorian activity that filled many leisure hours for women of your class. At the small writing desk in the corner of the drawing room, you find stationery, pens, and ink. The act of writing with a dip pen requires concentration and care. The nib must be filled with just the right amount of ink, applied to the paper at the correct angle, and refilled frequently. It's a meditative process, so different from the rapid typing or swiping of the modern world. You address your letter to a fictional friend, using it as an opportunity to record your observations about Victorian life and its hidden dangers. The physical act of writing helps organize your thoughts, creating a record of your strange experience in this other time. As your pen moves across the paper, you become aware of a growing feeling of unreality. The Victorian world around you feels simultaneously more solid and more dreamlike. The weight of your corset, the scratch of the pen nib, the ticking of the Antel clock, all seem hyper-real yet distant. You finish your letter and set it aside to dry. The winter afternoon is already fading to dusk outside the windows. Soon it will be time for tea, then dinner, then another night in this fascinating, frightening Victorian home. But as you rise from the writing desk, a wave of dizziness washes over you. You steady yourself against the furniture, blinking rapidly as the room seems to shimmer around you. Is it coal gas from the lamps, lead from the pipes in your drinking water, arsenic from the wallpaper, or something else entirely? The drawing room blurs and shifts. You close your eyes against the disorientation, and when you open them again, you're no longer standing. You're lying down in darkness, but not in the Victorian bedroom with its lumpy horsehair mattress. This bed feels different, softer, more yielding. Memory floods back. Your own bed, your own room. The 21st century. The Victorian experience was just a vivid dream, a journey through each time that existed only in your mind. You lie still, adjusting to this realization. Around you, the familiar shapes of your modern bedroom gradually become visible in the dim light. No gas lamps here, no arsenic wallpaper, no dangerous staircase waiting to trip you in the darkness. Instead, your home contains smoke detectors, carbon monoxide alarms, circuit breakers, child-proof locks, lead-free paint, and countless other safety features that you normally take for granted. Innovations developed over decades, often in response to tragedies caused by the very dangers you experienced in your Victorian dream. You reach out and touch your bedside lamp, clicking it on. Electric light, clean, safe, and available at the touch of a button. No servants required to light it. No risk of fire or gas leaks. No toxic chemicals involved in its operation. The contrast between your modern safety and Victorian peril is striking. We've come so far in protecting ourselves from the hidden killers that once lurked in every home. But your dream has given you a new appreciation for the Victorians themselves. They weren't fools or deliberately reckless. They simply didn't know what we now know. They embraced new technologies and products that improved their lives, unaware of the dangers these innovations sometimes introduced. And they were remarkably resilient, adapting to a world full of hazards we would find intolerable today. Their daily lives required a level of vigilance, physical labor, and acceptance of risk that modern people rarely encounter. You settle back against your pillows, feeling a new gratitude for the safety of your modern home. Your bed cradles you comfortably, free from lumps and poking springs. Your room is warm without the need for a fire that might die during the night. Your water is clean. Your food is safe. Your medicines are tested and regulated. These comforts and protections didn't happen by accident. They resulted from scientific advances, public health campaigns, consumer protection laws, and countless small improvements over the decades since Victorian times. Progress that often came at a cost to the illnesses, injuries, and deaths that eventually revealed the hidden killers and led to safer alternatives. Your eyelids grow heavy as you contemplate this evolution of safety. The comfortable weight of your blankets presses you gently into the mattress. Your modern bedroom, with all its technological conveniences, wraps around you like a protective cocoon. You yawn, feeling sleep approaching again. But this time, there's no anxiety about what dangers might lurk in the darkness. No worry about gas leaks or arsenic dust or structural hazards. Just the peaceful certainty of modern safety standards and building codes. Your breathing slows, becoming deeper and more regular. Your muscles relax one by one, releasing the last tensions of the day. First, your feet and legs grow heavy. Then, your hips and torso sink deeper into the mattress. Your RS drop, your neck relaxes, and your head settles perfectly into the pillow. The quiet hum of your home's heating system creates a soothing white noise in the background, so different from the irregular creaks and ticks of a Victorian house at night. Your breathing falls into rhythm with this gentle sound. Slow and steady, your mind drifts, no longer filled with thoughts of hidden killers and Victorian dangers. Instead, peaceful images float through your consciousness. Charlotte's smile, the warmth of the drawing room fire, the beauty of the ornate Victorian furnishings without their dangerous components. Your eyelids flutter and then remain closed, too heavy to lift. Sleep beckons, drawing you down into its depths. But unlike in your Victorian dream, there's no anxiety here. No need to remain vigilant against unseen threats. You can surrender completely to rest, protected by the invisible shield of modern safety standards. As you drift deeper towards sleep, you carry with you a new appreciation for both the beautiful craftsmanship of the Victorian era and the safety innovations that followed it. The best of both worlds, the aesthetic richness of the past and the health protections of the present. Your breathing becomes even slower and deeper. Your body feels wonderfully heavy, sinking into the mattress as if becoming one with it. All remaining tension melts away, leaving only peaceful relaxation. Your mind grows quieter, thoughts becoming fewer and more distant. The border between wakefulness and sleep grows blurry, indistinct. You hover in that delicious, in-between a state where reality softens and dreams begin to form at the edges of consciousness. And then you cross over, sliding gently into sleep. No Victorian dangers follow you there. Only the peaceful knowledge that when you wake, you'll be in your safe modern home, protected from the hidden killers that once lurked in even the most beautiful Victorian houses. Sleep deepens, carrying you further from consciousness. Uzness. Your breath is slow and steady, your body completely at rest. Dreams might come perhaps of Charlotte in a world without arsenic wallpaper and lead paint, or of Victorian beauty without its deadly components, but they will be just dreams, not the semi-real immersion of your earlier experience. And in the morning, you'll wake refreshed with a new perspective on both historical dangers and modern safety. The knowledge of how far we've come and how much we owe to those who identified the hidden killers and worked to eliminate them from our homes. If you enjoyed this journey into the hidden dangers of Victorian life, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Oliver's Stories. It truly helps me keep creating these quiet explorations for you. Drop a comment below and let me know where you are watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing who is drifting off with us across the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for appreciating. Just how far we have come. Now, sleep well, rest deeply, and be grateful for every modern convenience that keeps you safe, from smoke detectors to central heating, from pasteurized milk to lead-free paint. Good night, sweet dreams.